Over the years, what I have learned to do and what I encourage people to do is start to look at ways to make money, get good at it, and then you'll never worry about anything when it comes to money because I know how to make money and I know how to create cash flow.
Welcome to Inspired by Success, the podcast where I deep dive into the mindset of successful entrepreneurs, CEOs, and thought leaders. Get ready to be inspired and gain valuable insights to unlock your true potential.
Transform your financial future with this episode sponsored by KE Financial Services.
Today, our guest is a financial expert with over 25 years of experience and is changing how we see financial freedom. He believes in guiding people to understand their finances, optimize cash flow, and create multiple income streams through investments and entrepreneurial pursuits. As an author of 6 books and certified in finance, he's a pioneer in inspiring and uplifting others. His name is Jeff Kikel, and today he shares his secrets to financial independence and entrepreneurial success. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Jeff.
Hey, Linda. Thank you for having me on today.
Tell us about what you do and why you do what you do.
Well, I mean, for 30 years, I've been in the financial services industry. I would say the way I always explain it is I was that garden variety financial advisor for a pretty good chunk of that time period, worked with people, helping them plan for their retirements. And about 10 years ago, I kind of went off the deep end a little bit. I had written my first book and I was looking for ways to promote the book. And I decided, well, maybe I'll do a podcast. And I realized at the time I'd actually never listened to a podcast before, so I probably needed to do that first. And I ended up listening to a podcast by a gentleman named John Lee Dumas, who's become a friend over the years and mentor. And John's podcast was the first one at the time that was a week or a daily podcast. So he was the first person ever that had done a daily podcast. By the time I started listening to him, he was probably 2, maybe 3 years in and had done close to 1,000 podcast interviews. And I started listening to him, and John's show is called Entrepreneur on Fire. And I started listening to John's shows and listening to these people that by the time I started listening to him, these people were very famous. He had interviewed a ton of really successful podcasters, YouTube stars, bloggers, who had all gone on to massive amounts of success. And I started listening to their stories and ended up realizing, well, their stories aren't much different from mine and they're no smarter than I am. Why am I, continuing? Because for most of my career, I'd worked for somebody else. Why am I continuing to work for somebody else? Why can't I become an entrepreneur? And that was kind of the point about 10 years ago that I decided, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to work for somebody else. I'm never going to reach my ultimate goal, which was to be financially free by age 55. So I wouldn't be able to do that if I worked for somebody else. And I decided I was going to jump off the deep end. I was working for people that I didn't really enjoy working for. Decided, you know what? I can make stupid decisions for myself as well as somebody else can do that for me. And I quit my job. I founded 2 businesses. One was a financial practice. The other was a co-working space, which was my original idea. And I launched off into 10 years of craziness, everything from almost losing our house, to having to do all kinds of crazy jobs on the side to keep ourselves afloat while we kind of figured it out. And the end of the story is that by age 55, I was actually financially independent. Almost to the day that I turned age 55, we were completely financially independent.
Wow, that's incredible. Great story. But can you explain, you say financially free, how much do you need to be financially free by 55? Because, inflation rates, and you've got to factor in all these things like medical when you're getting old, and people might want to go on vacations and stuff like that. So how much is enough?
First off, what I teach people now is to stop focusing on dollar amounts, because that's the financial industry, whether it's here, whether it's in Australia, whether it's anywhere, is so focused on you've got to amass X amount of dollars before you can retire. And the reality comes down to it. You don't need to amass money. You need to understand how to make money. And then, you can replace your income. So it's not as hard as most people make it. Most people will make this thought process of, oh, I've got to have $1 million. And a lot of people, what was real popular for a while was the FIRE movement where, oh my God, live like a pauper for, 10 years and then amass this money. And then you can, go on to live your life the way you want. The problem is people learn to, amass this money by just basically taking everything away from themselves. And then they don't know what to do. And what I teach people is stop focusing on the dollar amount, the ultimate dollar amount, and start focusing on the cash flow and start to learn how to make money. That was probably the hardest thing for me at the beginning, was to go from that mindset of, hey, I had a job where I got a paycheck every week and all that, which was the safe thing. And in the end, I realized that the safe thing was me being in control of everything, me being able to create different income streams. And then, when I needed, okay, I want to go on vacation. I'll give you the perfect example. I learned a trading technique called the money press from a gentleman named Preston James. And I mean, probably the most profitable trading technique that I've ever learned in 30 years of doing this. And I just I just got back from a trip overseas. I'm sorry.
Is that currency, trading stocks? What is that? What type of trading is that?
Actually trading stock options. Yeah, trading stock options. Okay. And it's a very simple technique. It's very repeatable. It's one of those things, and if you're overseas, you might or might not have the capability to do some of this, but in the United States, we do. And it combines a long-term option with a weekly option. And you basically create an income stream from that. And we were, my wife and I decided to go on vacation this year. And I said, all right, we're going to need roughly $10,000. And what I did was I took a certain amount of money, set it aside, and it wasn't a huge amount of money. And I used this money press technique to create $10,000 over a period of about 4 months. And use that, so basically my trip was paid for 100%. And, I went from there. So I think, over the years, what I have learned to do and what I encourage people to do is start to look at ways to make money, get good at it, and then you'll never have to worry about, I never worry about anything when it comes to money because I know how to make money and I know how to create cash flow.
Can you give us some advice on how one can start making money and leaving their 9 to 5 as well, or someone who's thinking of being an entrepreneur? But what is your advice for that person? Instead of jumping straight in, people sometimes don't.
Well, and you don't. Yeah. And I would never encourage anybody to do what I did, which was to just literally jump out into the deep end and hope that I was going to be able to float. You should, while you're there. So, I created what I call the Freedom Day method. It's an 8-step method. The first thing you need to know is, well, all right, how much money do I actually need? So I need to understand what I have coming in currently, what's going out. And then when I look at that, that tells me what I call my minimum required income. So this is the amount of money that I need to bring in every month to be able to do it. And in a lot of cases, if you took out the fluff out of your life, it's really not that big of a number. I would say for most people, it's between $4,000 and $10,000 that they need to make per month. Okay, now I know what I need to make. Second step in there is probably what people wouldn't think to do, and that is write up a bucket list of things that you have just absolutely want to do in life that you've got to do before you die. Write up as many of those as possible. I encourage people to do as much as 100 things, and then pick 3 to 4 that you can do over the next 6 months. So now I've got a little goal for myself. I'm not trying to replace my whole income. I'm not trying to go, I'm going to get my freedom right away. I just need to figure out a way that I can kind of retrain my brain a little bit. Then I want to start looking at ways to make money. Well, what do you know? What expertise do you have? Everybody has expertise in some way, shape, or form. Even if it's a hobby or something along those lines, there are people who are interested in the knowledge that you have. The easiest way to make money is if you have some kind of topic that you're an expert at, put something together, put together a training program and market it online. Boom. It's easy. It's repeatable. It's something that doesn't require you to do something in that case. But what I tell a lot of people is just do something that gets you thinking from the perspective of, I'm not going there for a job. I'm going there for a purpose. I'm trying to get to my 3 or 4 goals. Maybe that's something that requires time up front. If you have any areas of expertise that you're good at that you could sell, you can use upwork.com. That was one of the things I did to keep us afloat. Is I have a really unique talent for creating business plans, and that's what I did for about a year. Was I put myself out on upwork.com and I sold my ability to create business plans for people, and I could easily do 3 to 4 of those a month. I'd typically charge about $1,000. So I was making $4,000 to $5,000 pretty quick for not for something I was already pretty good at in those cases. So if you have a skill that you do at work, you could look at doing something on the side that way. That starts to get your brain thinking of, okay, if I do something, I can make money doing it, and then I get to reward myself in the end. Once I've done that, now I want to start looking at the long-term ways to make money. And there are thousands of different ways to make money. What you want to start to do is investigate a few, what interests you, focus on that one thing. Don't try and do 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, because that was the mistake I made early on. I'd created like 6 businesses. I was spread so thin, and the best thing that ever happened was COVID, because it made me slow down and it made me really look at what was important in life. And I started to then trim down the things I was doing. And I mean, to this day, my life is extraordinarily simple. I draw from about 4 sources of revenue. And I've gotten rid of other sources of revenue because they're areas that were kind of taking me out of what I do really well. And to this day, I mean, I basically focus on real estate, stock and option trading, and I've got a co-working business that brings in revenue from that aspect. And then I've got a wealth management practice that it's small because I'm still rebuilding. I had sold my other practice last year, and I'm building that, and really not in a big hurry to build a big business there. And then, of course, podcasts and books and things like that. Those are areas that, I do as I go, and those are things that I make money at.
Wow. And so which one's been the most successful for you out of all the 4 that you've done? Curious.
I will say real estate probably has been my most successful. It didn't start off that way because I was going down the path of, what everybody teaches in the real estate business. Go find a property that's beat up, fix it up,
Flipping.
rent it out, the Burr method, rent it out, refinance that property, do the things, same thing over and over and over again, which works until it doesn't work, at that point. And so I actually, on my podcast, interviewed a guy named Scott Jellison, and Scott had a concept that he calls a slow flip, which is basically you becoming the finance company versus the landlord. So I acquire properties at really low cost. Typically, I can buy them out of pocket. And then I turn around and I sell them to someone who might not qualify for a mortgage, for a 30-year mortgage. And I just keep doing that over and over and over again. And that creates effectively all the money I need plus a lot extra. So a lot of that then gets funneled into investments and other projects.
Wow, that's interesting. I haven't heard that concept before.
Yeah.
What other investments are you investing in?
So, I mean, I invest I keep my life very simple. No interest in getting into, apartment complexes and all that garbage. I keep it very simple. I do residential property. And then I funnel my investment wise. I funnel it into a couple different investment strategies using individual stocks primarily and options. And I use those to create income and make it very, very simple. I've learned I overcomplicate things. So I'm not allowing myself to overcomplicate things anymore. And I make more money today than I've ever made in my life. If I decided I wanted to take a year off at this point, this trip to Europe was a test to see if I could run my world from a distance. So we were
Mm.
there over 2 weeks, which gave me a really good test. Could I run all the investment strategies that I do and buy real estate? And I was able to buy a piece of property and do 2 weeks of investment strategy, which I typically only do on Fridays. So I was able to do that and still have the time to go visit Christmas markets all over Germany.
How did you manage to do that? Are you like just doing it remotely yourself, or you're relying
Yeah.
on a team, or what?
No, I did it all remotely myself, no team at all. I have learned a strategy for acquiring properties that's unique to the United States. And it's what's called tax deeds. So it's people who haven't paid their taxes. These properties get pulled back into the state and are owned by the state. And I find them, identify them. I call myself a treasure hunter because it takes a little bit of work to find them. But basically, you come in, you pay the taxes off, and you own the property at that point. So in many cases, I'm able to acquire a property for under $5,000
Oh my
that's
gosh.
worth 100,000. And I
Jeez.
just turn around and either flip them or I sell them to an investor or somebody that's looking for me holding the note on it for 30 years.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Because see, the thing is, I'm always interested in investments and
Mm,
stocks and crypto, but one thing that I haven't learned about is real estate. I thought it
yeah.
never was interesting. I was never interested in it, but hearing stories like that, that's like
Mm,
fascinating because you don't hear about that very often as well. How do people
no.
like? Is that only for the US people, or what? Is it?
It's unique for the U.S. Now, I mean, I know of people. So there's an organization called the U.S. Tax Lien Association where I learned all this from a guy named Tony Martinez, and Tony's been doing this since the early '90s. He really actually figured this stuff out by
Mm,
himself, and then he started educating people on it. And I learned from Tony how to do
wow.
this, and it's a very specialized skill. But they have
Mm,
wonderful training that they do through USTLA, and then I kind of combine that. I took some ideas from that, and then I took the what I learned from Scott Jellison and kind of created that whole technique that I use today to make money. And like I said, it's one of those things. There's no creative financing. That's what I always loved about real estate is you have all these people like, oh, there's all this creative financing and all that. I'm like, there's no creative financing in my world. It's very simple.
mm,
Acquire property cheap, turn around, find somebody who's looking to buy that property, hold the note. I no longer own the property. I don't have to be I don't have to manage tenants. All I have to do is manage checks coming in once a month. That's it. That's all I
wow.
do. And then rinse and repeat over and over and over again. And it just creates a lot of, where I used to do a rental property. I might buy a property for, let's say 80 grand. And then, maybe it's worth another 120. And then I would rent it out. And, between my mortgage and what I was making, I might make an extra $200. Well, in most cases, I'm making 800 to $1,000 with
Mm.
no loan. So there's no risk there. And it's the simplest thing ever because I don't have to manage tenants anymore, which I hate.
Yeah, I've heard some horror stories about
Yeah.
tenants and just the headaches involved when you're renting houses and stuff. That's why I was like, no, I'm
Mm.
not interested in real estate. But
Ugh.
this is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
And,
interesting
I
topic.
looked into crypto and, I think the
Mm,
thing that I learned with crypto is one, and this may be bad for people that listen and love crypto. I just think it is
mm,
so fraught with so many ways that you can lose your money by
mm,
people trying to steal your money and everything else. And I don't like investing in anything where I constantly have to have my guard up and have to
mm,
worry about, oh, somebody's going to send me an IM and I'm going to do something wrong and then they're going to steal my money away from me. And so many of those crypto projects, it's like, it reminds me of multi-level marketing. It's just like, here's a project that comes out. Oh, let's everybody rush into that. And it goes up and then it starts to go down and people rush to the next thing. Honestly, I don't like that. I like things that are predictable for me. So, that's why I largely trade individual securities. I build, my portfolio has 2 levels to it. One level is, well, technically 3. It's got one level of high income, generating high dividend, generating investments, where I could care less whether they appreciate or depreciate. I'm just looking for the dividends. And I typically target ones up in the 15 to 19% range. I have a portion. Oh, easily.
15 to 19% dividends percent.
Dividends. Yep. Absolutely.
Wow.
In the United States, I mean, and probably other places in the world, but 3 primary areas I focus on are what are called CLOs, collateralized loan obligations. The others are business development corporations, BDCs. And the final are typically secured, high level credit for small businesses primarily. And these typically are mutual funds that invest in these. And, anywhere from 9 to 19% easily can be attained.
And, but is it more riskier though, or is it less riskier? Because 9 to 19%,
that's the problem. That's the fallacy that the industry has made, primarily because, I think the financial industry is not real good at what it does. So, my industry tends to be, we'll accept, an 8 to 9% return because that's safe. And, anything above that's way too risky. Well, I mean, those 3 things that I just told you are some of the lowest risk things you could possibly do. Most business development companies might, yes, they're going to have loans that are going to go bad, but they typically will have 300 to 400 different companies that they're loaning money to. So the chance of more than 1 to 2% of those going belly up in any given year is pretty slim. So it's very predictable. And these type of investments, just instead of worrying about those things appreciating in value, they just pay out all their income in dividends. So, it's absolutely predictable. You know exactly what they're going to pay every month. If they cut a dividend, I can make a decision at that point. Do I want to stay on board with them? Because what'll typically happen is they cut a dividend, the price goes down. But the price goes down, that means the dividend yield goes up in those cases. So, it might stay at 18 or 19%, and I could care less. I mean, it goes down, but I'm still earning 19% overall.
Wow. What if Robert Kiyosaki always talks about the imminent crash, and there's a lot of people that talk about the crash that's coming and a depression. What are your thoughts on that? And if there was, what would your strategies be to, avoid?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't really, honestly, I wouldn't change my strategy much. The option strategy that I use, if the market really is getting pummeled, I typically would just sit on the sidelines for a bit. The strategy I use, we have in the United States what are called weekly options. So they're options that, every Friday expire. And they are very unique in the fact that because they're really short term, they are extraordinarily generous. So typically, what I do, what the money press method is I might, let's say I find stock XYZ, and stock XYZ, I'm looking at it and it's been kind of on a flat, increasing trajectory. I'll buy, a put, so a put option, so I can, give that to some, or I can put that stock to somebody at a specific price. I'll buy that up till like the earnings date. So let's say earnings are in February. I might buy a February put. And then what I'm going to do is between now and February, I'm going to sell weekly options, weekly puts against that. So my risk is the difference between what, where I sold the thing at and where I bought the put. So there might be, $5 to $7 in there. That's my risk. And my gain is whatever I sold that weekly option for. And they're like clockwork. You buy them on Friday. Over the weekend, they lose a massive amount of time value. So instantly you have a profit there. They kind of amble along until Friday. And then between Thursday and Friday night, or Thursday night and Friday morning, they lose a ton more time value. And typically they're almost worthless as long as they're above, let's say it's a 75 put. If it's $75.01, that is going to expire worthless that day. And I get to, all that money that I sold, I get to keep at that point. So it's doing exactly what we want to do: buy low and sell high. So I'm buying those back on Friday for, a penny, let's say, and I've sold them for maybe $1 to $2, which, it's $1 is worth $100 in options.
So you're kind of like insuring yourself in a way as well.
Yeah.
But you're
That's exactly
yeah,
right.
it's
And
like
that
insuring yourself.
the long-term put, the February put, is my insurance that if the thing just craters and goes down, that's going to increase in value for me, and I can always sell that back at that point. So, like I
Yeah,
said,
because
the only
for
risk is
those
really
that
in
don't know what
between the two.
you're minimizing risk. For those that don't know what
Yeah.
a put is, can you explain? Because I remember reading a book about
Yeah.
put and call options, and the way
Yep.
I visualize it is that put the phone down or call is calling up. So
Yeah.
you're basically betting it to go down. That's with the put, right? And then a
Yes.
call option
Yeah.
is
If you
betting it to go
buy,
up.
so if you buy a put, you're
Mm,
betting that it's going to go down,
yeah, it's
because
going to go
if
down.
it drops,
Yeah.
so I'm saying I can put the stock to you at, let's say it's now, it's dropped $10. I get to put
Mm,
it to you at $10 more than what the price is currently. I can sell it to you at that price. So I'm locking in the right to sell at a specific price. When you sell a put, it's actually a bullish thing, because I'm selling the put. Now I'm assuming that the stock is going to go up. So as long as the stock keeps going up or stays the same where we started, then as long as it's 1 cent higher than what the strike price is. So the strike price might be, let's say, 75. If it's 75.01, that's going to expire worthless on Friday. And then I get to keep all the money, all the sell that I just did. I get to keep the premium that I sold. And that's basically what my job is now. I've kind of worked my way a little bit out of the financial services industry as far as, seeking out more clients, and I basically just trade for my own portfolio at this point, and that requires about 20 minutes to an hour every Friday, and then I'm done.
wow.
So I was
How long?
in 2 weeks ago, I was in Prague on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and traded my whole, group of those things in the bar at the hotel. While I was drinking a gin and tonic, I went ahead and traded that whole portfolio for the next week. And then, I was off doing stuff that night, went to dinner.
Wait, first of all, do you do that on via your phone as well?
I did
On
it.
your
I had my
phone?
laptop with me, but yeah, it was easier
Okay.
to, it's a little easier on the laptop, but I could have done it by the phone. Yes.
How long did it take you to get to understand all this? So I'm just thinking of for the audience, if they wanted to learn all this,
Mm.
how long did it take you to understand and become comfortable in doing that type of investment? Because it sounds
Well,
like an
I think
interesting
for,
strategy.
for me, I understood the concepts very quickly because I'd been trading options for 30 years. So it did
Mm,
not take me long to ramp up. Now it's a little bit of a different way of thinking than
yeah.
the way I was trained. I was trained to buy call options and, be bullish from that perspective, which, there's a ton of
Mm,
risk to that because you can be really wrong and they can work against you really bad because
mm,
they're very leveraged, and they, leverage works in both directions. But
mm.
it didn't take long. And, Preston James has got the Traders Edge Network. It's www.tradersedgenetwork.com. And they've got, for in the United States, it's like, I think $90 a month to become part of what they call the Wow Insider. And they've got the best training I've seen on this type of stuff. And they've just got unique techniques that they use that nobody else uses that are out there. I mean, I'd spent 30 years learning this stuff, and I was blown away by a lot of this. I
Wow.
was blown away by some of their trading techniques and their rules and things like that. It's made me a much more profitable trader. I've
Mm.
made good money over the years, but it's made me a wildly better trader as a result of that. And, for $90 a month, I'm in, because I get access to all the stuff that they're doing. They do a
Mm.
weekly call, so
Mm.
if you're in the United States, it's pretty easy because you can put it in place. If you're somewhere else, if you can figure out how to get to be able to trade in the United States, you
Mm.
can make good money
Mm.
doing it.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions that I wanted to ask in relating
Sure.
to in relation to that, because my partner does trading as well, and
Mm,
he does with crypto and stocks, but he doesn't do what you're doing. He's just watching the
mm,
charts. But we've talked about, there's a lot of like manipulation, and I think AI is becoming a lot more prominent. There's
mm.
more bots now as
Yep.
well, so it's just you're trading and versing against bots. What are your
Mm.
thoughts on that? Do you see that with what you're doing as well, and how do you combat that?
It doesn't, it
Okay.
honestly, I've not had any issues with it. I mean, occasionally the market will, it's really when you get big moves in the market that, like October. So I started doing this about a year ago,
Mm.
and it was just consistent every week making money, and some weeks you don't, certain positions you don't make money. But I mean, I've in the end pretty much made money every single week. Some
Mm.
weeks a lot more, and some weeks, not as much. And then we
Mm.
had a pretty big kind of market reversal in October this year here in the States, and that was a little bit hectic. I mean, it was the only time that I've been doing this where I literally had to spend every day watching the market and trading the options to make sure I didn't get whacked by what was going on. Yeah. Now, what I've learned is it's better to just sit on the sidelines when stuff's that crazy.
Mm.
If it gets
Wait it
crazy,
out.
you just sit it out on the sidelines.
Mhm.
I that was good because it happened relatively early into what I was doing. And, I was moving around and trading and all this stuff. And I've learned now, just like, okay, if I'm starting to see craziness, just wait it out. You hold on to the put options that you own at that point. If the market goes down, those are going to go up in value. And you can always close those positions out or roll them down or something like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things like, okay, you learn to, okay, now when I have that situation again, I know what to do. And you
Mm.
just kind of, you add to your body of knowledge and your skill sets at all times. But
What
yeah,
about the tax?
say
So, what
what?
about the tax implications? Like all these tax
Oh
implications,
yeah.
how do you mitigate and help with tax? I think
Now the
it's
way
a
I look
long
at
another. Yeah.
Yeah. The way I look at taxes are people make too much they make too much of taxes. If you're paying taxes, it means you're making money.
Mm.
So, I look at it from these are not tax, advantaged investments. You could do these in the United States, you could do them inside of a retirement account. Part of my money is inside of a personal retirement plan, a corporate retirement plan. So,
Mm.
whatever happens, I don't pay tax on that until I start taking the money out. I also do some real estate within that same portfolio. So, when I get those checks in every month, half of that goes into my retirement account, which, is completely tax deferred and will be tax free down the road. The other half comes to me, and I choose to either reinvest it or take it as income at that point.
I like
But
it.
I
Yeah.
don't I don't get too I don't get too crazy about taxes, because if I'm making money, I don't really care. I'll share and put taxes out there. So
Well, that's good. Yeah. Well, I like it that you're thinking long term as well. Your
mm,
upcoming book focuses on planning the exit from a job or a business. What key strategies do you recommend for a successful exit plan? Some people sell
mm.
and their businesses, but I've seen a lot of businesses go under recently as well. So, can you give any key strategies that you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the biggest thing is first off, you've got to have a plan. Most people, I've been doing exit strategy planning for businesses for over 10 years. And what I will tell
Mm.
you is 70% of business owners don't put any thought into the plan. They put more thought into the vacation that they're going to take versus what, the exit from their business is going to look like. So, my suggestion is find a good exit planner. Just Google exit planning and see if you can find a good exit planner, somebody that understands this, preferably somebody who's actually exited from a business instead of just being a theoretical practitioner. And put together a strategy and a plan and look at, there's two types of businesses that you have. You either have a lifestyle business where it's maybe you and a small team or something like that, but the business is largely focused around you. So in that case, you don't really have anything to sell. You might have a client list, you might have some assets, but in most cases, you don't have anything to sell because it's so centric around you, owner centric at that point. And then you have a business, something that's functioning without you being intimately involved in every decision and everything else, which is a saleable business. So you really need to understand where you're at first. If you are, if you're in that lifestyle business and you don't really want to put in the effort to turn that into what I would consider a saleable business, then you best be pulling money out of that thing and putting it into other strategies, investments, creating additional sources of income. Because whenever you decide or life decides for you, I call it the 3Ds: death, divorce, disability. If one of those three things happens, and you haven't planned for it, you're up a creek. I mean, your income source stops at that point if you can't work. So the sooner you start to plan for, okay, well, I'm going to start, if I'm not going to put the effort and the money into growing my business or turning it into a saleable business, then I best be taking that money out and putting it either into investments that are starting to generate income stream and can replace my income, or I'm investing in maybe another business where I don't have to be the one working it or something along those lines. If you're sitting there and you're in a job and you're going, well, how the heck am I going to get out of here? It's those steps that we talked about before, the 8 steps of the Freedom Day method. Figure out what you need, figure out your minimum required income, come up with a bucket list, then do a little bit of an income test, create some kind of income to pay for a few of your bucket list items, then start to focus on creating income streams. And then once you get to 125% of that minimum required income, you're free. That's the day you woke up and you didn't have to get up and go to work that day. And then the next step is you got to decide, do you want to stay or do you want to go? If you want to stay, you're going to be the best employee ever because you have no money stress at all. You're just getting up and going to work because you love it. If you hate your job, you're probably going to be the worst employee that's ever existed because you don't need to be there and you hate doing it. And you're just going to be miserable. You're going to be happy, but you're going to make everybody else around you miserable because you don't have to be, and then you live the Freedom Day lifestyle. I mean, you figure out what makes you happy. For me, it was, I still enjoy working. So I still have businesses that I'm actively involved in. I don't, financially, if they're successful or not, it doesn't really matter to me. In that case, I by nature, I'm going to make them work, or I'll figure out a way to make them work. But I also live that bucket list lifestyle. I mean, I've got my list of things. And when I knock off, this trip that we went on to Europe was a big bucket list trip where we knocked off 7 bucket list items on the trip. And, this was things that we'd always wanted to do. We wanted to go to the Christmas markets. I wanted to be in London for Christmas. I wanted to go to an ice bar. I wanted to drive a car on an F1 track. So, all those things I was able to do. Well, money didn't really worry. I didn't worry about money. I pretty much control my day, so I can take off time whenever I want. I proved that I could actually run or at least manage my investments and my business from a distance, which it worked perfectly. The world did not blow up in that time period. So, we're going to continue to do these kind of tests longer and longer and longer every time to prove that we can do this, to the point where we eventually get to the point where we're going to spend a year, overseas and run our
Wow.
businesses and run our investments overseas.
Wow. Speaking of businesses, can you share some insights on your experience working with small businesses and helping them grow
Mhm.
sustainably? Because lots of small businesses, yeah, you're right. Some people are the one man band that does it, and
Yep.
some might have a small team. But can you share any advice on how they can grow successfully and sustainably as well?
As quickly as possible, you've got to get yourself out of the middle of that business. Um,
Mm,
that was the mistake I made for 4 years. I made myself successfully unsuccessful for 4 years.
mm,
I kept being involved in every business. I kept creating new businesses, and the focus of those businesses was all around me, because I was the most important
mm,
person and I was the one that knew everything and all that. And what I learned was, okay, I've got to get myself out of this. And once again, the pandemic was a massive help because it forced me to slow down, because I was working 70, 80-hour weeks, 7 days a week up until that point. And then all of a sudden everything came to a stop. And I wasn't going out chasing after clients all over town because we
mm,
couldn't. So I had to learn how to find clients through the internet. I had to learn how to have meetings with clients via the internet and via Zooms, which we had never really done before. And all of a sudden, my life became much, much, much more efficient. And the fact was, I could now all of a sudden go, hey, Linda, do you have any friends that friends or family that would benefit from something like this? Oh, yeah. Well, I've got a friend that's in Seattle, or I've got a family member in Seattle. Okay. Well, then we'll just, let's have a conversation with them. And it was not that, well, we have to be in the same town and we have to meet in person and everything else. So, when I left the firm that I was at, we had grown more clients outside of the state that we lived in 2020 than we actually grew inside of the state we lived in during that
mm,
time
mm,
period. So, I think the biggest thing to answer your question, you got to figure out how you can get yourself out of that. You're doing everything, you're in the midst of it,
mm,
and how you can figure out ways to make money without you having to be actively involved with it. If you're a
mm.
business that kind of requires you to be involved, well, what are other ways? Can you teach people how to do
Yeah.
things and create maybe a training program for that? I've started to do that in my financial practice. I teach people how to do this stuff. And then if they get to the point where they're like, yeah, I really need you to help me. Okay, well, that's kind of the filter, but I can at least help more people by creating training programs and things like that to teach them how to do some of the investment strategies that I do for clients. I just want to help them do it. And if they want me to help, that's the filter. They get to the end and they're like, okay, well, this is great. I understand it, but I kind of want to do that. So those things, you've got to do that. And you've also got to think about it as a business owner. If I'm doing this, let's say I'm going to create a new income stream, what can I do that's going to require the least amount of my time and I can make the
Mm,
most amount of money? And that's the filter I live life with now. That's when the
mm,
money press thing came to me and I learned about it. I was like, crap, that's easy. Then all I have to do is really one day a week for 20 minutes is all I have to do there. The
mm,
trading strategy I use for most of my client accounts is one day per month. I found a guy who had a really good system that I was able to tweak, and I trade one day a month for my clients. So that means it leaves me with 29 days in most months where I can focus on other things. And then I focus on my
mm,
client accounts one day a month. So those are the things that I focus on today because I value my time much
mm.
more than I value this feeling that I have to be superior and involved in
Yeah.
everything in my business.
So let's take it back to this training program. You're doing a training
Yeah.
program plus you're investing for your clients as well, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I am. Yeah. So
Okay.
we're launching. I'll be launching in conjunction with the TV show that I'll be doing
Mm,
through. Your Home TV in conjunction with Kathy Ireland Worldwide. I'll be launching that in February, and I will have a training program that people that watch the show can get information from our website, and basically the website is going to be your family your finances.com,
Okay.
and that basically is where people can learn some of the techniques that we teach, and the Freedom Day method and how to do that and become successful and teach your family while you're doing it.
Oh, that sounds good. How do you stay updated on the latest trends and changes in finance and entrepreneurship?
I just
Like, do
read
you have anything that you?
it, I read on average about 120 books a year. So I typically read 2 books a week, on a variety of subjects. But I really focus on real estate, investment strategies. I read a lot about stories of other entrepreneurs that have been successful. So I love biographies and learning what
Yeah,
made people successful. So
yeah.
I
That's
think
what I
the
was.
the biggest thing is I never stop learning. I never stop reading. I mean,